This is the brief on violation of parliamentary immunity. So what we're looking at here is Article 145 of the revised Penal Code. This whole law is basically designed to make sure our lawmakers can speak and vote freely, without outside interference or worrying about being arrested for no good reason. Okay, so first up, interference. It's a crime to stop a member of Congress from, say, attending meetings or casting a vote using things like force or intimidation. And get this, the offender here can be any person. It doesn't have to be a government official, and you don't even have to succeed. Just having the intent to stop them from doing their job is enough. Second, let's talk about arrest and search. This part is aimed squarely at public officers, like the police. They generally can't arrest or search a legislator while Congress is in session. But, and this is a huge but, there's something called the 6-year rule. This immunity only applies if the crime they're accused of has a penalty of 6 years in prison or less. Anything more serious? Well, that immunity is gone. And finally, this protection has its limits. It really only protects against outsiders. The courts have been clear that a lawmaker's own colleagues in Congress can still discipline them according to their own House rules. So really, Article 145 is all about balancing protection for the legislative process with making sure no one is totally above the law. Immunity is a shield for the job, not a get-out-of-jail-free card for the person.
Have you ever thought about what it takes for a lawmaker to do their job without fear? I mean, really think about it. It turns out there's this kind of legal shield that protects them, so they can debate and vote on our behalf freely. It's called parliamentary immunity, and today we're going to unpack exactly what this shield is and how it works.
So let's start with this question. Imagine someone physically blocks a senator from getting into a session to cast a deciding vote. Or what if a congresswoman is being threatened to keep her quiet on a key issue? Is there actually a specific law that protects the integrity of that whole process? The answer is a big, fat yes, and it's pretty powerful.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the big picture idea of this protective shield. Then we're diving straight into the nitty-gritty of the law, Article 145 and the 2 major crimes it covers. And we'll finish up by looking at a really important exception, because this immunity isn't a blank check. Okay, let's get right into it. Why do we even have this concept in the first place? Well, it's all about protecting the democratic process itself. So at its core, parliamentary immunity is exactly what it sounds like, a legal shield. It's designed to make sure that lawmakers can get on with their jobs, debating, voting, all of it, without being afraid of some external pressure or harassment. And here's what's really important. This shield protects the office, not just the person holding it.
So this shield sounds great in theory, but how does it actually get enforced in the real world? Well, that's where Article 145 of the revised Penal Code comes in. This is the law that gives the shield its teeth. And it does that by laying out 2 very specific crimes. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you've got obstruction, and notice, this can be committed by any person. But look at the other side, unlawful arrest. That's a crime specifically for public officers. Let's dig into that first one a little deeper.
So crime number 1, obstructing duty. What does that actually mean? The law is surprisingly specific about this. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's break this down. First, the offender, it can literally be anyone. Doesn't have to be a government official. Second, look at the methods. It's not just about physical force. It could be intimidation, threats, or even trying to trick them through fraud. And third, and this is the kicker, it's all about intent. The goal has to be to stop that legislator from doing their job. Plain and simple.
And this right here is such a crucial point. The person doesn't even have to succeed in stopping the lawmaker. Just the intent. The fact that their whole purpose was to prevent them from doing their job is enough to be a crime. The law cares more about the motive than the outcome, which is a really powerful legal idea.
Okay, so let's shift gears now to the second crime. This one is a bit different because it's aimed squarely at public officials who might try to abuse their authority against a lawmaker.
This one has a very specific checklist you have to go through. First, the person doing it has to be a public officer. Second, the action is an arrest or a search. Third, timing is everything. The legislature has to actually be in session. And fourth, and this is a big one, this protection only works if the legislator hasn't committed a serious crime.
And that brings us to the magic number 6 years. The immunity from being arrested while the legislature is in session only applies if the crime in question is punishable by not more than 6 years in prison. If it's anything more serious than that, well, that shield from arrest just vanishes.
So, we've established this powerful shield that protects lawmakers, but what happens when the problem isn't coming from the outside? Well, as we're about to see, this shield isn't invincible. It has its limits.
Which leads to this fascinating question. What if the pressure is coming from inside the House, so to speak? Can a lawmaker just shout parliamentary immunity to get out of being held accountable by their own peers in the legislature?
Well, the courts have already tackled that one. In a huge landmark case, Osmena versus Pendleton, the answer was a clear no. The Supreme Court basically said that immunity is a shield against external interference. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for internal rules. A legislature has to be able to police its own members.
So the main takeaway here is crystal clear. The shield faces outward to protect lawmakers from outside forces trying to mess with their work. It does not face inward. The Senate, the House, they can absolutely hold their own members accountable for their actions. And in the end, it all comes down to this incredible balancing act, doesn't it? On one hand, this immunity is vital for protecting our democratic process from being sabotaged. But on the other hand, you have to wonder, does it strike the right balance? Where do you draw the line between protecting a legislator's voice and making sure they're held accountable like everyone else? It's a tough question, and one worth thinking about. Thanks for digging into this with us today.
Okay, let's unpack this. You know, there is one specific word in the realm of politics that acts like an immediate blood pressure spike for almost everyone I know. You hear it on the evening news, usually attached to some high-profile scandal involving a politician, and the immediate reaction is an eye roll, or maybe just shouting at the TV in frustration.
I think I can probably guess the word you were thinking of. Is it immunity?
Bingo. Immunity. It is such a loaded term, isn't it?
It really is.
To the average person, to me, and probably to you listening right now, it often sounds like a magic spell that the powerful pass to make consequences disappear.
Like a shield.
It feels like a get-out-of-jail-free card. It feels like the system saying, I am special, laws are for you, not for me. It breeds this intense cynicism.
That is the cynical view, and honestly, it is a very understandable view given how the term is often abused or, misunderstood in public discourse.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to strip away the cynicism and look at the actual mechanics. We have a stack of legal sources here, specifically focusing on Article 145 of the Revised Penal Code. And the picture these documents paint is radically different from the popular perception.
That's why I was so excited to dig into this one, because when we actually read the text, not the headlines, not the tweets, but the actual statute itself, it turns out this isn't about protecting a politician's personal life or their bank account.
No, not at all.
It's about protecting the machinery of democracy.
Exactly. If you think of the government as a complex engine, parliamentary immunity isn't a shield for the driver to drive recklessly. It's a protective casing for the gears.
Oh, I like that analogy.
It ensures the engine keeps turning, that the pistons keep firing, even if people are outside trying to throw wrenches into it.
So our mission for this deep dive is to map out the boundaries of this protection. We are going to dissect Article 145. We need to figure out, how does it work? Who can violate it?
And most importantly, where does the protection stop?
Yes, because it definitely stops somewhere. It's not infinite.
It stops at very specific, very important lines. And what's fascinating about the source material we have today is that it breaks this crime violation of parliamentary immunity into two completely distinct concepts.
Right. I noticed that immediately in the outline. It's not just one big blanket rule. It's two separate modes, two different flavors of the crime.
Two separate modes with two different sets of rules, two different types of offenders, and really two different purposes.
Yeah.
It's almost like two different laws living under the same roof.
And one of them involves a 6-year rule that I think is going to surprise a lot of people regarding when a politician can actually be arrested.
Oh, absolutely.
It basically turns the whole untouchable myth on its head.
The 6-year threshold is the mathematical heart of the issue, yes. It brings a level of objective calculation to something that usually feels very subjective.
But before we even get to the math, there was something else in the notes that caught me off guard. When we talk about violating immunity, I usually assume we are talking about a corrupt judge or a police chief overstepping their bounds.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects, yeah. Maybe a general declaring martial law. But the first mode of this crime, The list of potential offenders is much, much wider.
It is the widest possible list you can imagine in criminal law.
The text says the offender can be any person.
Any person.
That means me. I mean you. That means the listener on their commute right now. It means a protester, a lobbyist, a random guy on the street, a wealthy donor.
Yes.
We are all potential offenders here.
That is the hook. We tend to think of immunity as a shield against the state, against the king or the president. But Article 145 acknowledges that threats to legislative independence can come from anywhere.
Huh.
A mob can paralyze a legislature just as effectively as a dictator can. A single person with enough malice can disrupt the democratic process.
So let's start there. Let's open up part 1. The first mode. This is all about interference. The source outlines specific acts that are punishable. It's not just being mean to a senator or hurting their feelings.
Oh, no. It's very specific about what you cannot disrupt.
Right.
It is highly specific. The law is looking at the core functions of a legislator's job. It's asking, what does a legislator actually do? And if you interfere with those specific functions, you are crossing a red line.
Okay, so the first function listed in the source is attending meetings.
Simple enough on the surface, but look at the fine print in the source. It expands on that significantly.
It says preventing a member from attending meetings of the legislature. That's the obvious one. The big session hall, the gavel, the live stream on C-SPAN, or the local equivalent.
Sure.
But then it continues, or of any of its committees or constitutional commissions.
And that expansion is critical. It shows a deep understanding of how government actually works.
Why? Why go out of the way to list committees? Why not just say the legislature?
Because if you follow the actual workflow of a democracy, the plenary session, the big televised debate where they stand at the podium, is often just theater.
It's the final act.
It's the final ceremonial step. The real work, the grinding, boring, technical work of drafting laws, happens in committee rooms. It happens in the Committee on Ways and Means. It happens in the Committee on Justice.
That's where the sausage is made.
Precisely. That is where the commas are argued over. That is where the budget allocations are slashed or added. If I wanted to kill a bill and I was a strategic bad actor, I wouldn't wait for the final vote on the floor.
You'd go earlier in the process.
I would try to stop the key sponsors from attending the committee hearing where they are marking up the text. If you block them there, the bill dies in the cradle. It never even reaches the floor.
Wow.
Article 145 recognizes this vulnerability. It protects the entire legislative ecosystem, not just the final stage.
And constitutional commissions. I circled that. That seems like a very specific addition.
It is. We are talking about bodies like the Commission on Appointments or the Judicial and Bar Council, where legislators often sit as members.
Right.
These are high-stakes environments. They decide who becomes a judge, who becomes a general, who becomes a cabinet secretary. The pressure to interfere in those meetings is immense because the stakes are personnel power.
So if I block a senator from getting to a Commission on Appointments hearing because I don't want a certain general confirmed, I'm violating Article 145 just as if I blocked them from the Senate floor.
You are. You are disrupting the constitutional process of vetting leadership. The law treats that interruption with the same severity because the function is just as vital.
Okay, so that's attending meetings. The next protected act listed is expressing his opinions.
This is the speech element.
But isn't this just freedom of speech? We all have that. I have that. Why does a legislator need a specific penal code provision protecting their opinion?
That's a great question. Because a legislator's opinion isn't just their opinion. That's the key difference. When you or I speak, we speak for ourselves, for our own conscience. When a representative speaks, they're technically speaking for a district. They're the voice of, say, 200,000 people who voted for them.
Ah, I see. So silencing them is silencing the district.
Exactly. It's a multiplier effect.
Yeah.
If you coerce a legislator into silence, you are effectively disenfranchising their constituents. You are creating a dead zone in the democracy where those people have no voice in the national debate.
So it's not about their personal feelings.
No, it's about representation. The law elevates the protection of that speech because the stakes are structurally higher.
And the third act, naturally, is casting his vote.
The culmination of the job. The vote is the atomic unit of democratic power.
That feels like the most obvious target. If you can stop the vote, you control the outcome.
Right. And history is full of examples, globally, where factions tried to physically prevent rivals from entering the chamber to deny a quorum or swing a vote.
Just physically blocking the door.
Exactly. This statute is the do not cross line for that specific behavior. It says you cannot win by physically subtracting the opposition.
So we know what is protected. The meeting, the speech, the vote. Now, let's talk about the how, because this is where I think the any person offender really comes into play. I can't just be charged with this crime because I tweeted that I disagree with a senator, right?
No, absolutely not. That is protected speech on your part.
So what crosses the line? The source lists 4 specific methods of violation.
Yes. Force, intimidation, threats, and fraud.
Let's break these down. Force and intimidation seem pretty physical.
They are. Force is the direct application of physical power. I tackle you in the hallway. I lock you in a room. I slash your tires so you can't drive to the Capitol.
Right.
I physically bar the door. Simple, brutal, but simple.
And intimidation and threats.
They're psychological. I don't touch you, but I promise that if you go to that meeting, something bad will happen.
Like a threat against your family or something.
Exactly. If you vote yes on this bill, we will burn down your house. Or if you speak on the floor today, we will release your private emails. It's coercion.
It's distinct from force because it operates on the will, not the body.
Precisely. It tries to break your resolve. But the result is the same.
Yeah.
The legislator stops.
But then we get to the 4th one. And this is the one that I kept coming back to in my notes. Fraud.
Fraud.
It feels quiet. The others are loud. Force, threats. That's action movie stuff. Fraud is sneaky. Why is it included here with the same weight as violence?
Because Article 145 is result-oriented. The goal of the law is to ensure the legislator is present and active. If I use a baseball bat to stop you, or if I use a clever lie to stop you, the damage to the legislature is identical.
You're not there.
You aren't there. The vote isn't cast, the mechanism fails.
So walk me through what legislative fraud looks like. The source doesn't give a specific case study, so we have to infer based on the definition.
We look at the legal definition of fraud: deception, trickery, inducement by false representation. Imagine a scenario. You are a key swing vote on a controversial bill. The vote is scheduled for 2:00 p.m.
Okay, I'm the swing vote. Everyone is watching me. The pressure is on.
At 1:00 p.m., you receive an official-looking message. It appears to come from the Speaker's office or the Secretariat.
Yeah.
It has the right letterhead, the right font.
It looks legit.
Totally legit. And it says, session suspended due to electrical failure in the main hall. Resume tomorrow at 9:00 a.m.
I believe it. Why wouldn't I? I go get lunch. I go home.
Exactly. You miss the vote. The bill passes or fails by 1 vote. Yours.
Wow.
I didn't threaten you. I didn't touch you. I didn't hold a fist to your face.
Oh.
But I used fraud to effectively remove your mandate from the equation.
And under Article 145, that is a crime.
That is a crime.
That is terrifyingly easy to imagine, especially now with how easy it is to fake things.
It is. And notice the offender. Any person. That could be a political rival, could be a lobbyist, he could be a prankster with a sophisticated email spoofer.
It implies that the integrity of the information reaching the legislator is part of their immunity. You cannot tamper with their reality to manipulate their official duties.
That is a very poetic and I think very accurate way to put it. You cannot tamper with their reality. They need a clear channel of truth to function.
Now, there is a kicker in this section regarding intent versus result. The source text has a phrase, actual prevention not required. Purpose to prevent being enough.
This is the attempt doctrine, and it is crucial for understanding the severity of this law.
So let's go back to my tackling analogy. I'm waiting in the hallway. I see the congressman coming. I want to stop him from voting. I lower my shoulder. I charge.
Until you are committed. The intent is there.
But the congressman played varsity rugby in college. He sees me coming, stiff arms me into a potted plant, steps over me while I'm groaning on the floor, walks into the chamber, and votes yes.
The very vivid image.
I failed completely. He voted. The legislative function was not disrupted. Did I commit the crime?
You are guilty under Article 145.
Why? No harm, no foul, right? He did his job. The system worked.
In civil law, you often need damages. But in criminal law, specifically here, the harm is the attempt. The state is saying that the mere act of trying to intimidate or stop a representative is an attack on the sovereignty of the government.
It's the audacity. It's the act itself.
It's the chilling effect. Think about the alternative. If we only punished successful prevention, we would be sending a message that it's open season on legislators, provided they are tough enough to survive the gauntlet.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can cast a vote.
Exactly. We don't want a survival of the fittest legislature. We want a deliberative one. We don't want senators having to take karate classes just to ensure they can get to the podium.
That makes a lot of sense.
So the law punishes the intent to prevent. Whether you succeed or fail is irrelevant to your guilt. It might only matter for your sentencing.
That makes the law extremely proactive. It draws the perimeter fence way out. It says, don't even think about it.
It has to. Because once the vote is missed, you can't always undo the damage. A law might pass that affects millions of people. You can't just say, oops, sorry, let's do a do-over. So the penalty attaches to the attempt itself.
Okay, so that is mode 1. The offender is anyone. The act is stopping the work. The tools are force or fraud. And the intent is what lands you in handcuffs.
Summarized perfectly.
Now we pivot. We are moving to part 2, the second mode. And the vibe changes completely here. We are leaving the world of mobs and tricksters.
It does. We're entering the world of official power, the state versus itself.
The source describes this section as arrest or search. And the first thing that jumps out is the offender. It's no longer any person.
No. Here, the source specifies the offender must be a public officer or employee.
This is a huge narrowing of the scope. Why? Why only public officials?
Because private citizens don't arrest people. I mean, there is citizens arrest, but broadly speaking, the power to search a person or detain them is a state power.
It's a monopoly of the state.
Right. It belongs to the police, the NBI, the military, the courts. So this section is written specifically to regulate those who wield that power.
So this section is specifically written to police the police.
Yes, it is a check and balance. It is the legislative branch building a wall against the executive and judicial branches.
The separation of powers in action.
Exactly. Throughout history, the easiest way for a king or a president or a prime minister to win a vote was simply to arrest the opposition the night before.
Can't vote if you're in a dungeon.
It is the oldest trick in the authoritarian handbook. If you control the police, you control the legislature, unless you have a law like Article 145.
So let's look at the conditions. The act is arresting or searching a member of the legislature, but there's a timing constraint.
A very important one.
The source says, while the legislature is in regular or special session.
This is a vital distinction.
Why does the calendar matter? Why should immunity depend on whether it's July or August?
It goes back to the functional theory we discussed at the start. The immunity exists to protect the work, not the person.
Okay.
If Congress is in recess, if they're on their summer break or the Christmas break, there is no session to attend. There is no vote to cast. The legislative machinery is powered down.
So the functional need for protection drops.
Correct. If a congressman gets into a bar fight in Boracay during the congressional recess, he is just a citizen. The police can arrest him. There is no parliamentary immunity because there is no parliament happening at that moment.
That really bursts the bubble of the untouchable politician. If they are on vacation, they are fair game.
Legally, yes. They're just citizens subject to the same laws as you and me.
But what about when they're in session? This is the part that confuses everyone. Let's say Congress is in session. A senator is driving to the Senate. He gets pulled over. Can the police arrest him?
It depends. And this is where we have to do some math.
The math. Okay. This comes from the constitutional link in our sources. Section 11, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution.
Right. Article 145 of the Penal Code has to be read in harmony with the Constitution. The Constitution sets the threshold.
And that threshold is?
It says immunity applies if he has not committed an offense punishable by more than 6 years imprisonment.
Not more than 6 years. That is the magic number.
That is the line in the sand.
So let's play out some scenarios to see if I get this right. I want to really test this.
Let's do it.
Scenario A. The senator is driving to the session. He is speeding. Maybe he has an expired license. Maybe he hit a mailbox and kept driving.
Okay. Minor traffic offenses, maybe damage to property, low-level stuff.
The penalty for those is a fine. Maybe a few days in jail at most.
Definitely less than 6 years. Usually arresto mayor or less. A few months, maybe.
So the police officer stalks him, sees it's a senator, realizes Congress is in session. Can he arrest him?
No, he cannot.
Even though the senator broke the law.
Even though he broke the law. If that officer arrests him and drags him to the precinct, that officer is now the one committing a crime.
The officer is violating Article 145.
Correct. The officer is now the criminal in this scenario.
That feels wrong, just viscerally. Why should he get away with it?
He isn't getting away with it forever. He is getting away with it right now.
Okay.
The logic of the Constitution is what is more important to the nation at this exact moment. Punishing this man for a broken mailbox immediately, or ensuring he is present to vote on a national budget.
It's a hierarchy of values, a triage.
It is. The state decides that the legislative function outweighs the immediate enforcement of minor crimes. We can charge him later, we can fine him later, but we cannot stop him from working today.
Okay, I get that. I can see the logic, even if it feels a little uncomfortable. But let's dial it up.
Right.
Scenario B. The senator is driving to the session, but this time he isn't speeding. He has a kidnapped person in his trunk, or he just shot someone in a fit of road rage, or he is transporting 50 kilos of meth.
Serious felonies, heinous crimes.
The penalties for those are huge. 20 years, life imprisonment, reclusion perpetua.
Way more than 6 years, no question.
So the officer pulls him over, sees the senator, sees the meth, Congress is in session. What happens?
The officer arrests him immediately.
No immunity.
Zero immunity. None. It evaporates.
Even if it stops the vote, even if the
Right.
budget fails because he isn't there.
Yes. Because at that level of criminality, crimes, punishable by more than 6 years, the state decides that the danger posed by this individual outweighs his legislative utility.
The triage flips.
It flips completely. We cannot have a murderer sitting in the Senate just because the gavel is banging. The protection is gone.
So this 6-year rule is essentially a filter. It filters out harassment, but it catches the monsters.
That is the design. It prevents the president from ordering the police to arrest the opposition for jaywalking or libel or unjust vexation, all minor crimes, just to clear the room for a vote.
So it prevents the weaponization of petty law enforcement.
Exactly. But it ensures that if you are a serious criminal, you cannot hide behind your title.
I think that distinction is lost on 99% of the public. We hear immunity and think it's total, but it's actually a very specific window.
It is a functional shield, not a personal halo. It only works for the small stuff and only when it's necessary for the job.
I want to pause here and just appreciate the mechanism. It's actually quite elegant.
It is.
It acknowledges that politicians might be petty criminals, but also that the executive branch might be petty tyrants. And it tries to balance both risks.
It is a classic example of checks and balances. It assumes bad faith on both sides, that legislators might break laws and that police might abuse power, and it tries to find a middle ground that keeps the government running.
Before we move to the final piece of the puzzle, let's do a quick side-by-side comparison of these two modes. I want to make sure the listener can see them clearly.
Good idea. Let's map it.
Mode 1.
Okay.
The offender. Any person. Me, you, anyone.
Right.
The act. Preventing the work. Meetings, speech, vote.
The core functions.
The tools. Force. Fraud. Intimidation.
The how.
The key. Intent is enough.
Correct. Broadest offender. Specifically about interference.
Now, mode 2.
The other side of the coin.
The offender. Public officers only. The police, the agents.
Yep.
The act. Arrest or search.
Bodily liberty.
The context. Only during session.
The timing is everything.
And the key. The 6-year rule. Only applies to minor crimes.
You have nailed the structure.
Yeah.
The 2 pillars of the article.
So we have covered the threats from the outside. The angry mob, the trickster, that's mode 1. And the overzealous police, that's mode 2. But there is one more threat. What about the threat from inside the house?
Yes, the internal accountability. This is where we see the limits of immunity. This is where the shield has no power.
We have a case study here, Osmana versus Pendleton. This sounds like a showdown.
It was. This is a foundational case regarding the limits of immunity. It really draws a line in the sand.
The principle cited is parliamentary immunity unavailing in connection with responsibility before legislative body itself.
It's a bit of legalese.
Yeah, let's translate that.
The simple translation is, your immunity shield works against the police. It works against the courts. It works against the mob. It does not work against your own colleagues.
Unpack that for me. What does that mean in practice?
Let's look at the facts of the Osmana case briefly to set the scene. Congressman Osmana delivered what's called a privilege speech on the floor of the House, and in it, he made some really serious accusations against the president.
Standard political theater. A bit of mudslinging.
But his colleagues in the House felt he went too far. They felt his behavior was disorderly and unbecoming of a member. So the House created a committee to investigate him and potentially discipline him.
And Osmana said, you can't touch me. I have parliamentary immunity. I can say whatever I want on this floor.
Essentially, yes. That was his argument. He went to the Supreme Court and asked them to stop the House from disciplining him. He argued that his immunity meant he could not be held answerable for his speech.
He tried to use the immunity shield against his own house.
He did. And what did the Supreme Court say?
Let me guess. No.
The court said no. They ruled that while he is immune from criminal prosecution for his speech, you can't send him to jail for it, he is not immune from disciplinary action by the House itself.
So the House can punish its own?
Yes. They can censure him. They can suspend him. In extreme cases, they can expel him. The power is inherent to the body.
And he can't use Article 145 or the Constitution to stop them.
He cannot. The court reasoned that the legislature must be the master of its own domain.
I like that phrase.
It's powerful. If the Supreme Court stepped in every time the Congress tried to enforce its own rules of decorum, the separation of powers would collapse.
Right.
The judiciary would be running the legislature.
That makes sense. It's like a private club. The police can't bust in without a warrant. That's mode 2.
Right.
But the club president can still kick you out for spitting on the floor.
That is a perfect analogy. The Constitution gives the legislature the power to punish its members for disorderly behavior. That power is absolute and internal. Immunity does not apply there.
So it creates a closed loop. The only people who can truly punish a legislator for what they say on the floor are the other legislators.
Precisely. It puts the burden of integrity on the institution itself. It relies on the body to self-police.
Which, well, we can debate how effective that self-policing is in reality. Sometimes it feels like they protect their own no matter what.
We can absolutely debate the practice, but legally, that is the structure. The courts wash their hands of it and say, that's your house, you clean it.
So, to bring this all together, Article 145 isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a very specific technical set of walls.
Right.
Wall 1, you, the public, can't stop them from working, either by force or by fraud. That's interference. Wall 2, the police can't arrest them for minor things while they are working. That's immunity from arrest.
Correct.
But there are gaps in those walls.
You get gaps.
Gap 1, the police can arrest them for major crimes, thanks to the 6-year rule.
The serious stuff gets through.
In Gap 2, their own colleagues can punish them internally for their behavior, thanks to Osmina versus Pendleton.
It's a complex architecture, but when you see it laid out like that, you realize it's not about privilege. It's about function. It's about keeping the lights on in the democracy.
It prevents the system from being hijacked by force, by fraud, or by executive overreach.
Exactly. It's a structural safeguard, not a personal cook.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier because it's been bugging me.
Okay.
We talked about fraud in Mode 1, and you gave that example of the fake notification canceling the session.
Yes, the fake email.
I want to push that a little further because we are living in a very strange time regarding information, deepfakes, AI voice cloning, targeted misinformation campaigns.
It is a new frontier for law. The old statutes have to face new technologies.
The law says any person who uses fraud with the purpose to prevent a legislator from expressing an opinion or voting is guilty.
Correct. Those are the elements.
Okay. Imagine a scenario where a group of constituents, or maybe bots disguised as constituents, flood a representative's inbox with completely fabricated data. They send thousands of emails saying, 90% of your district hates this bill, but in reality, 90% love it. They use AI to generate thousands of fake phone calls to the office, all with unique AI-generated voices.
Misinformation is pressure, a manufactured consensus.
Exactly. If that representative believes the lie and changes their vote or decides not to speak up because they are afraid of this fake backlash, has that group committed fraud under Article 145?
That is a provocative question.
Yeah.
And I think a very difficult one for a court to answer.
But just based on the text, they used deception. Their purpose was to prevent the expression of an honest opinion, and they succeeded.
Strictly speaking, looking at the elements, it fits. The law doesn't define fraud as only financial fraud or a fake email. It defines it as deceit.
So,
If you deceive a legislator to alter the course of their duty, you are theoretically in the crosshairs of this statute. You could argue that creating a completely false impression of public opinion is a form of fraud aimed at preventing a vote or an expression of opinion.
it's wild to think that a law written in the 1930s might be the primary legal weapon against deepfake political interference in the 2020s.
It shows that the principles of protecting the legislative mind are timeless, even if the tools of attacking it have changed. The law protects the function, and the function relies on truth, or at least a good faith search for it.
It's something for our listeners to chew on. Next time you see a viral political post and you see that overwhelming wave of comments, ask yourself, is this just noise? Or is this an Article 145 violation in disguise?
A very sobering thought.
That's it for this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of immunity. We hope you feel a little less cynical and a little more informed.
Thanks for listening.
Stay curious. We'll see you in the next one.
Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are opening up the revised Penal Code to examine a statute that really sits right at the fault line between democracy and the police power of the state. We're talking about Article 145, violation of parliamentarian immunity.
Right.
Now, on the surface, this looks like a very technical rule about keeping cops away from Congress. But when you actually strip it down, it asks a much more volatile question. How much protection does a representative of the people actually deserve? Is this law an ironclad fortress designed to ensure the legislature can never be silenced? Or is it, as some critics suggest, a fragile conditional rule that just collapses the moment the state decides to really flex its muscle?
It's great to be here. And frankly, I think fortress is generous. We all kind of grow up with this idea that parliamentary immunity is this magical force field. You get elected and boom, suddenly you're untouchable. But I'm here to argue that Article 145, especially when you read it alongside the 1987 Constitution, is really a paper tiger. It promises protection against any person in one breath, and then it hands the keys right over to the police and the courts in the next. My position is that this law prioritizes public order over legislative freedom to a degree that makes the term immunity almost misleading.
I see the vulnerabilities you're pointing out, and we're definitely going to get into the weeds on those conditions, but I fundamentally disagree with that paper tiger label. I believe Article 145 is actually one of the most aggressive defenses of democracy we have on the books. When you look at the first mode of violation, specifically the criminalization of the mere intent to prevent a vote, the law is radical. It prioritizes the function of the legislature above the actual result. It says that the attempt to silence a voice is a crime, regardless of whether it succeeds. I'm arguing that this law is designed to make the legislative process sacred ground, forcing the state to back off unless it has an incredibly good reason.
Sacred ground is a nice metaphor, but I just don't think it survives contact with reality. When we get into the details, specifically that distinction between any person and public officers, and the massive carve-out for crimes punishable by more than 6 years, we see the truth. The law protects legislators from hecklers and maybe minor annoyances, but it leaves them completely exposed to the executive branch's police power. It's not a shield, it's a visitor pass that can be revoked.
Then let's test that theory. I want to start with the first half of Article 145. This is the section that deals with preventing attendance at meeting, expression of opinion, or casting a vote. The text is explicit here. The offender uses force, intimidation, threats, or fraud to stop a legislator. But the key insight, the thing that really elevates this statute, is the scope of the offender. It says the offender can be any person.
Which is a standard catch-all in criminal law, isn't it?
Well, it's more than a catch-all. It's a universal warning. It covers everyone. It doesn't matter if you are a powerful corporate lobbyist, a rogue police chief, a union leader, or just a private citizen with a grudge. If you use force or fraud to stop a member from attending, speaking, or voting, you are liable. But here is the critical takeaway, the real insight, if you will. The law does not require the offender to succeed. The text says actual prevention is not required.
Meaning the crime is in the attempt?
Precisely. This is a massive shift from standard criminal liability, where we often look for damages or results. Here, the damage is the mere existence of the threat. The law values the sanctity of the legislative process so highly that we punish the purpose of the offender. If I threaten a senator to stop them from voting, and that senator ignores me, walks into the hall, and votes anyway, I am still a criminal under Article 145. The shield protects the legislator's peace of mind, not just their physical ability to vote. It ensures they don't have to be a hero to do their job.
That sounds robust in theory. I'll grant you that protecting the peace of mind is a noble goal. But let's apply some pressure to how this actually works. You're celebrating the purpose requirement as a strength, but I see it as a procedural nightmare. If actual prevention is not required, then we are essentially prosecuting thoughts and intentions.
Well, we are prosecuting overt acts, threats, and fraud driven by that intent. You still have to do something. You have to make the threat or commit the fraud.
But without a result, without the legislator actually being stopped, proving that my specific purpose was to prevent a vote is incredibly difficult. Let's say I'm a lobbyist. I tell a senator, if you vote for this bill, I will campaign against you next year.
Is that a threat? Is that intimidation? Or is that just politics? If the senator votes anyway, and I'm charged under Article 145, a court has to decide if my purpose was criminal or political. Without the result of the vote being stopped, the evidence is entirely subjective. A law that relies on proving specific intent without a corresponding result is, historically very hard to enforce. It scares people, sure, but does it actually convict them?
It shifts the burden, certainly, but criminal law often deals with intent. Attempted murder requires intent. Conspiracy requires intent. We don't just throw out the law because intent is hard to prove. The existence of the statute serves as its deterrent. It draws a line in the sand. It tells the public, don't even try it. It frames the legislative function as something you just can't mess with. Even if it's hard to prove in court, the fact that you can be arrested for trying to scare a senator is a powerful check.
Deterrence is valuable, sure, but let's pivot to where that deterrence completely falls apart. My biggest issue isn't with the first mode, the intimidation part. It's with the second mode of violation, which deals with arrest or search. This is where the rubber meets the road. You can threaten a legislator, and that's bad. But arresting them, that removes them from the board entirely. That silences the vote definitively. And this is where your fortress starts to look like a ruin.
You're referring to the public officer distinction?
Exactly. Look at the shift in language. In the first mode, the offender is any person. In the second mode, arrest or search, the offender must be a public officer or employee. This creates a bizarre legal asymmetry. If a police officer arrests a congressman illegally during a session, they violate Article 145. But if a private security firm, or a mod, or a political rival's private army detains that same congressman, they have not violated this specific immunity statute.
Well, they would be liable for kidnapping, coercion, or serious illegal detention. It's not like they get away with it.
Oh, they get away with violating parliamentary immunity? They face standard criminal charges, sure, but the specific protection of the legislature, the idea that this is a crime against the state's institutions, vanishes. Why is the shield only effective against the police? If a private group physically stops a senator from getting to the session hall by locking them in a room, that is an arrest in the physical sense, but it doesn't trigger Article 145 second mode.
I think you're misinterpreting the intent of the distinction. The law assumes that arrest and search are state functions. Private citizens don't conduct searches in the legal sense. They commit trespass. The law is specifically targeting the abuse of state power. It's trying to prevent the executive branch, the police, the military, from decapitating the legislative branch. The fear isn't that a random kidnapper will take a senator. The fear is that the president will use the police to arrest the opposition before a crucial vote. That's why it focuses on public officers. It's a check on the other branches.
But does it actually check them? That brings me to the timing constraint. The second element requires that the legislature be in regular or special session at the time of the arrest.
Which is a functional requirement.
It's a loophole the size of a truck. Congress is not in session 365 days a year. There are recesses, there are weekends. If the immunity against arrest only applies when the gavel has banged, then it's not parliamentary immunity, it's office hours immunity.
Office hours immunity is a catchy phrase, but it ignores the rationale.
But think about the practical application. A vindictive executive branch doesn't have to violate Article 145 to silence a critic. They just have to wait for Friday afternoon or wait for the Christmas recess. The moment the session ends, the shield drops. That officer can arrest the member for a minor crime without violating this article. If your goal is to protect the legislator's independence, why does that independence evaporate when they go home for the weekend?
You're framing functional as flawed, and I think that's unfair to the text. The purpose of the law isn't to give the individual person a get-out-of-jail-free card for their entire life just because they won an election. It's to ensure the body can function. If Congress isn't meeting, arresting a member doesn't prevent a quorum. It doesn't stop a vote. It doesn't silence a debate on the floor because there is no debate happening. The law is calibrated to protect the work, not the worker. If we extended it to 24/7 protection, we'd be creating a privileged class of citizens who are effectively above the law at all times.
That distinction is cold comfort to the legislator sitting in a cell during recess, unable to prepare for the next session or meet with constituents. You say it doesn't stop the work, but if you arrest the opposition leader on Friday, they aren't exactly going to be ready to debate on Monday.
But let's assume they are in session. They are on the floor. The gavel is down. We still have to deal with the biggest hole in the armor, the one that makes me question the entire concept of this shield. We have to talk about the constitutional tether.
The serious crime exception.
It's not just an exception. It defines the rule. Article 145 doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's tied to Section 11, Article V of the 1987 Constitution. The immunity from arrest only applies if the legislator is accused of an offense punishable by not more than 6 years imprisonment.
Correct. That corresponds to persone correctional maximum.
Think about the implications of that. If a legislator is accused of a crime punishable by 6 years and 1 day prison mere minimum, the immunity is non-existent.
But those are serious crimes. We're talking about significant offenses.
Are they? I mean, serious is a subjective term, but the penal code is specific. We aren't just talking about murder or plunder or treason. There is a vast array of offenses that carry penalties above 6 years. Complex commercial crimes, certain types of graft, cybercrimes. If a political opponent can manufacture a charge that crosses that 6-year threshold, Article 145 offers zero protection. The police can walk into the session hall, interrupt a speech, and arrest the senator. The public officer is not liable under Article 145. The fortress creates a backdoor for the state.
You are arguing that the exception swallows the rule, but consider the alternative. If we didn't have that 6-year threshold, what would we have? We would have a legislature that serves as a sanctuary for felons. A senator could commit murder, run to the Senate floor, and be untouchable. The public would never stand for that, and they shouldn't. The law must balance legislative independence with the state's duty to punish crime. The 6-year line is that balance. It says, we will protect you from harassment from minor offenses, libel, slight physical injuries, assembly violations, but we will not protect you from accountability for major ones.
But here's the problem with your balance. Who decides what charge is filed? The prosecutor. Who controls the prosecutor? Usually the executive branch. By tying the immunity to the penalty of the charge, the legislature is effectively submitting to the discretion of the prosecutor. If I want to arrest you and I'm the DOJ, I just need to find a charge that carries 7 years. Maybe I upgrade a simple theft to a qualified theft. Maybe I stack charges. It flips the power dynamic. The legislature is supposed to be a check on the executive, but Article 145 implies that the executive's police power is superior to the legislative function whenever the crime is serious.
That is a cynical view of the justice system, assuming that prosecutors will always act in bad faith to upgrade charges just to secure an arrest.
It's not cynical, it's structural. We design laws for the worst case scenario, not the best.
Fair. But let's look at the prevention aspect again, specifically regarding the expression of opinion. I think this is where the law claws back some of that independence you claim is lost. Even if they can arrest you for a serious crime, they can't touch you for your words.
How so?
Article 145 protects the expression of opinion. This connects to the concept of the speech and debate clause. The law is trying to protect the intellectual independence of the member. Even if you argue the arrest protection is weak because of the 6-year rule, the protection against being silenced is strong. The first mode, prevention of speech, doesn't have the 6-year exception. You can't use force or fraud to stop a speech, regardless of the context. If I'm giving a speech exposing corruption and you drag me off the stage, you have violated the first mode of Article 145. It doesn't matter if I'm a criminal or a saint. The speech itself is protected.
That's a fair distinction. The speech protection is broader than the arrest protection. But that brings us back to the question of accountability. If the speech is protected from the police, and the person is protected from arrest, for minor crimes at least, is there any accountability left? Or does the legislator just float above us all?
That's where Osmana v. Pendleton comes in. It's the final piece of the puzzle.
Ah, yes. 109 Phil 863, the classic case.
This case clarified the limits of immunity within the Congress itself. The Supreme Court ruling states, parliamentary immunity is unavailing in connection with responsibility before the legislative body itself.
Which to me sounds like another vulnerability.
Oh, I read that case completely differently. I see Osmana versus Pendleton as the ultimate confirmation of separation of powers. The court essentially said, we, the judiciary, cannot touch you for what you say on the floor. The police cannot touch you, but your own peers can.
Which means you aren't immune?
It means you are immune from outsiders. The danger to democracy usually comes from the king arresting the parliament or the president arresting the senator. It rarely comes from the Senate disciplining its own. The law is designed to keep the branches separate. If a senator is disorderly or unethical or uses their speech to destroy a private citizen's reputation unjustly, the Senate punishes them. They can suspend them, they can expel them. That isn't a violation of immunity, that is self-regulation. It prevents the legislature from becoming a lawless zone, while still keeping the police out.
But look at the reality of politics again. You are relying on the peers being fair. If the majority party controls the chamber and they want to silence a minority member who is making too much noise, Osmenya versus Pendatun hands them the weapon. They can suspend or expel a member for disorderly behavior regarding their speech. The immunity of Article 145 protects me from the cop on the street, but it doesn't protect me from the Speaker of the House. If I'm a dissident voice, my greatest threat might not be the president. It might be my own colleagues.
That's democracy, though. The majority rules the chamber. You cannot use immunity to override the will of the body you belong to. Article 145 is a shield against interference, not against consequences from your own colleagues. If you alienate your own chamber, that's a political problem, not a legal one. The law preserves the institution's right to govern itself.
So let's synthesize where we are. We have a law that protects the process of voting and speaking from any person, but requires proof of intent, which is, well, slippery and hard to convict on.
And we have a law that protects the person from arrest, but only if the offender is a public officer, only if Congress is in session, and only if the crime carries a penalty of 6 years or less.
It feels like a block of Swiss cheese. There is substance there, surely. It's better than nothing, but the holes are critical. The session-only timing means a legislator is vulnerable half the year. The 6-year exception means they are vulnerable to any significant charge the executive cooks up. And Osmena means they are vulnerable to their own colleagues. If I were a legislator, I wouldn't feel very safe inside this fortress.
And yet, without it, the legislature would be paralyzed. I think you're underestimating the symbolic and deterrent power of the law. Even with the holes, Article 145 establishes the principle that the people's representative has a special status. The fact that we criminalize the intent to intimidate, that we don't wait for the vote to be blocked, is a powerful statement. It might not be an invincible fortress, but it's a clearly defined perimeter. It forces any attacker to think twice.
A perimeter that the state can walk right through if they have a warrant for a 7-year crime.
A perimeter that forces the state to at least have that warrant. That's the key. It prevents the random harassment, the petty detention, the low-level interference that could slowly bleed a democracy dry. It forces the opponent to escalate to serious measures if they want to stop a legislator. And escalating to serious measures, filing serious charges, arresting a senator, brings its own massive political cost. It puts the action in the spotlight.
I suppose that is the quick summary right there. Article 145 doesn't make a legislator untouchable. It just raises the price of touching them.
Exactly. It raises the stakes.
It forces the attacker to either use a serious legal charge which requires evidence and judicial scrutiny or face a criminal statute themselves.
And in a democracy, sometimes raising the stakes is the best protection we have. It prevents the cheap shots.
A fair point. It's not a fortress, but maybe it's a tripwire.
I like that. A tripwire for democracy. It signals when the line has been crossed.
And it's up to the courts and the public to react when that wire is tripped.
Precisely. We encourage you to read Article 145 and the Osmena decision. Decide for yourself if the tripwire is sensitive enough or if we need a thicker wall. Thank you for diving into the revised penal code with us.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
This has been The Debate.